without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Scallan. Karen Scallan is a person that we know very well. She's an advocate for people with disabilities and their family members and other parents of children with disabilities. She has the Special Needs and Parent Support Services of Louisiana, LLC. So she's a very knowledgeable resource person, has great information about this topic that we're going to share with you today about all hazard disaster preparedness. And at the end of this webinar, we'll be emailing you her PowerPoint and also a link to the evaluation survey so you can complete. Again, welcome everyone for attending, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Karen. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Wallace. I appreciate it. And thank you for inviting me to do the presentation today. I'm going to see if I can share screen with you guys right now. I'm hoping that one works. Yeah. Can you see that presentation up?
I see the power. There we go. That's what we want to see. There you go. You got it.
Awesome. And everybody can hear me okay, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. So I was really excited to see that 24 of y'all are on as participants today. This is a really important topic. It's one that we constantly have to drill as family members, agencies constantly need to be looking at their systems to support people with disabilities. And we need to continually remind ourselves that it's a continual process. It's not something that, oh, I did it and I'm done. This presentation is centered around all hazards preparedness, but I like to do it at this time of year because it is on our minds, beginning of hurricane season. So it is something that everybody's kind of thinking about, doesn't really want to think about, but it is in the news and something that maybe people will pay more attention to at this time of year. So this is my contact information, and you're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint when we're completed. Please note that you can contact me through either of the 3 blue contacts, the helpline, my new email, and that is a new email, or Facebook Messenger for my Facebook page for the business, Special Needs and Parent Support Services of Louisiana. But you can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest. I have a page with some more emergency prep kind of things, just pages that I saved from other emergency preppers. And then my website, you can check that out. There's a screen grab of my website emergency page at the end of this, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You're also going to notice throughout this presentation that there'll be a little great idea kind of light bulb there and in different spots. And that means that that's just an indication that this topic, this subject, or this link I'm giving you is a good idea to use for training for direct support workers. A lot of our self-direction participating waiver recipients are always looking for training opportunities for their direct support workers. There is a 16-hour training per year requirement, just like there is for agencies. And so these are just some ideas that people can use to train their direct support workers. So we'll go on to the next page. Now, getting into the meat of this, whenever you are developing sort of a broad plan, I'm going to give you a lot of information and a lot of information to tackle, but start somewhere. Start with asking questions. Start with asking questions of your emergency operations center and your local representatives in your parish. Find out what the possibilities are, the main possibilities are that you have to worry about. If you're in Shreveport, no, you pretty much don't have to worry too much about hurricanes, but you do still have some weather-related issues up in Shreveport. You may not be in the vicinity of a nuclear power plant, but utility loss, as we've seen in the last few weeks, has been a real issue. So find out what are the potential possibilities for your area. What could you be facing? And pretty much there's a lot on here other than maybe hurricane that most of the state could be faced with. Now, when you're making your plan, you got to kind of have an idea of what the shelters are like and what sheltering could mean, what some of the language that's being used means. A lot of confusion comes around people talking about special needs shelter. Whenever that term special needs is thrown out there, it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So it's not just about an evacuation like this, which is a picture of contraflow during Katrina. It could be a lot of different things. You may have to shelter in place briefly a day, maybe several days. You may have to go to a general population shelter for the short term, maybe just in your parish or your area, or a general population shelter for a long term, like when what we saw after Rita, Laura, Katrina, Ida, the 2016 flooding. There's maybe a special needs medical needs shelter. And when the state says special needs, they generally, in the terms of sheltering, they generally mean medical needs. You may shelter with your family or at a hotel, but without some planning and without more than one option, you might not be able to choose. And I added that this year to this presentation. You know, some of you may have seen this, some of this framework of my presentation before, but I added it this year because I really want to emphasize the need for redundant planning. So don't just say, I'm going to this one hotel or I'm going to this one family member, because that family member may be in a disaster zone as well. That hotel might be full. You know, you really have to have several options as backup plans, whether it's in your official plan that you submit with your plan of care for any waiver recipients, whether it's something like you kind of like, okay, I might have a plan B, but it's in my mind. Just make sure you're addressing some of that stuff. What would happen if you wound up having to go to a general population shelter like the mega shelter in Alexandria? Now, what can you expect with evacuation assistance? Well, in a large scale emergency, your parish is going to provide transportation out of the area to some sort of shelter. It could be a basic shelter. You may have to go to a medical special needs shelter if you're triaged and your emergency operations center sends you there. Or you could go to a point-to-point shelter, which I'm going to explain in a moment. But know that that shelter, no matter who's operating it, it may have food and water, it might have cots, but it might not. And when we looked at a disaster like the 2016 flooding in Baton Rouge, a lot of the shelters that popped up were really just high ground, a building in high ground that people gravitated towards because it was higher. They weren't really prepared with food and water and cots. So if you can bring things with you, you're going to have to consider that. They do provide pet evacuation, and pet evacuation is a requirement, but they don't stay in the shelter with everyone. There is a separate animal shelter for them nearby, I would say. And then 211 for shelter locations. No matter whether you are getting transportation from your parish or how you are getting out, keep that 211 in your phone. Make sure you've got it on your contact so you don't forget. All shelter locations are going to be in there. They're going to have the most up-to-date list. And that's for people going to basic general provider providing shelters, okay? Emergency operations center is where you're going to call for really complex issues, and we'll talk about that some more in a little bit. So again, in the large scale emergencies, we talked about what is a point-to-point shelter, and that is when your parish emergency department has contracted with a facility out of the vicinity of your parish to house only those parish individuals that they evacuate. They operate the shelter, they're responsible for the shelter, they're responsible for everything that's in the shelter. So if there is a possibility that you may have to use that parish point-to-point shelter, and there's always a possibility, any one of us could have to go to that for our parish, You definitely want to complete any registration ahead of time for your parish so that they have the ability to plan for appropriate amounts of food and bedding and whatever else is needed. That's how they know how many to plan for and have their contracts in place in case the parish is under mandatory evacuation. You want to call that local operations center and just, ask also if your parish has that. It's not every parish that does that. In a large scale emergency at the parish level, each parish is a bit different, but generally you're going to get some sort of notification of an emergency, especially a large emergency. You'll get an ambulance if you're bedridden and unable to get out by any other means. But again, that is a call to the emergency operations center to indicate what the issue is. You may also leave with a wheelchair lift transportation, but you may not. And I say that because I did have an emergency operation manager tell me, he was the parish person, that go-to person. It's my job to get your body out, not your chair. So we had some discussions around that, as you might think, but that's some of the mindset that you may encounter. So you really need to talk to your people, see what they're willing to do, what they're able to do, help them understand what it is you might need, and help them understand if you're a person who's going to have to shelter in place during a major hurricane event. And I say this because I'm encountering more and more families who are operating what I'm calling basically a one patient hospital room in their home. We do have a few families like this. I've encountered about 5 or 6. It's not a lot, but it is impossible for them to be able to move their loved one. Now, if water comes up, the ones I've encountered, I'm talking to saying, be sure you talk to your emergency operations center before the storm. Let them know that you have to stay and what your situation is. So if there is a flooding issue secondary to a large scale problem or to a storm of some sort, that they know you're there and they know what your needs are going to be so that they can get to you. And I'm, thinking in terms of what happened to some people in the 2016 flood, and a couple of other instances. And, these are just individuals who, in order to leave, they either have to leave with nothing or they have to stay because they cannot take everything that they need with them. And as I said before, most parishes do request that you register. My recommendation is just go ahead and register. If you don't need it, you don't need it. That's room for somebody else. You should also register if you need somebody to notify you if there's an emergency going on in your area. If you can't drive or you need, you can't arrange other transportation, you can't leave with another family. If you have a disability or medical needs requiring assistance in an emergency or no dependable transportation. And I would say this, if you only have one vehicle, you should register too. And the reason is because I've told this story before. We were evacuating for a hurricane. My sister went to gas up her car to get ready because we were caravanning with 2 cars because we had that many people. And when she went to gas up her car the night before we were supposed to leave the following morning, a kid who didn't otherwise have his brain engaged rammed right into her and could have totaled her car. He didn't, thank the Lord. We were protected, but it brought home to us the possibility of what do you do then if your car's totaled the night before you're due to evacuate. Again, that's a call to your EOC, but go ahead and register so that they're prepared for you if you have to come. Now, what is special needs assistance? Like I said before, special needs shelters are for people with medical needs. It is not for people who just have developmental delays or things like that. It's for people who are really sick. The medical special needs shelters, that's not really a place you want to be unless you have to be, because usually it's people who are really sick, but not sick enough to be in the hospital and potentially contagious. They'll probably have doctors and nurses coming in, other public health officials, medical supports. If you think this is an issue, and you might need it, you're going to call your parish EOC first, but you can also contact either OCDD, Office of Aging and Adult Services, Councils on Aging, and Human Service Authorities to get connected on and find out more of exactly what you should do if you think you need to be triaged for one of those medical special needs shelters. Please note, though, you can only bring one person with you. So if you're a parent of 3 kids and one of them qualifies for it, but you're a single parent, I mean, obviously that's not going to work. That's not going to be what you really need. What to bring to a shelter. So I talked before, you don't know what's going to be there. You want to bring blankets. It's going to be cold. They definitely keep it cold to keep germs down. Pillows, air mattresses, cots, non-perishable foods, and special dietary items. Personal hygiene items, medical records, medications, your clothes, comfort items, and then prepare for the possibility that you could lose power there. You might want a small portable ice chest. If you have to keep medication cold, like you might want to do that instead of using a refrigerator at the facility if they have a generator. Water, radio, items for your support animals. And I added that this year too, because we do need to consider pets and support animals as well. I have an asterisk by medical papers. I always remind people, and this is again goes to redundancies in your plan. You might have all of your medical records or all of your important papers on a thumb drive and say, I'm good to go. But number one, if there's no power, you can't get to that document. And number two, those thumb drives do tend to break. They're mechanical. You may also want to burn those things to a CD-ROM or DVD disc. So you have an alternative that is not going to be mechanical to break. And then you want to consider having some information, some of the basic important stuff on paper in case there's no power. Now, I recommend some things for document storage. We went for years trying to figure out how the best way to bring our important papers with us. And we used to have a fire safe, and it was very heavy, and then I have to go through it every year and pull everything out that I wanted when we go to leave. And it was a lot of extra work before we evacuated. What I changed to is I use this one on the left here. This is a water resistant fireproof case that's like a soft-sided kind of briefcase. I have the things that we want to take in case of fire, flood, or evacuation for other reasons. All I have to do is pick the bag up and go. It's so much easier. I don't have to spend that extra time and stress. Am I getting everything I need? I've already done it at a time when I'm not under pressure and in crisis. I've put everything together. It's in one place, and I just pick that bag up and go. The one on the right, these are smaller, but they're good for like things like money, passport, credit cards, that kind of thing. You can slip that in there and then put it into the larger bag or put it into your purse or whatever you may want to do. But it's just another option. So there's plenty of options out there. They're really relatively inexpensive. I think I paid $25 for my silver one like this. And I found it on Amazon. You can find them lots of places. The other thing that's going to be really important to you being able to successfully evacuate and be as prepared as possible without relying on other people, because that's what this is about. We have to rely on ourselves a lot more than we ever thought we would have to in some of these scenarios. So let's talk about a 72-hour survival kit, or what a lot of people call a go bag. So I have a backpack. It's a kind of one I got on sale, just found it on sale. And we put in an extra set of clothes, an old pair of shoes, just something that we can slip on if our clothes and shoes are wet. Flashlight, copies of those important documents. I do keep a CD-ROM instead of all of the paperwork in there, but I have some of the basic stuff, one or two things in paper. A first aid kit. Some emergency money. It doesn't have to be a lot. If you've got a roll of quarters, a couple of rolls of quarters or something like that, that might just be enough to get you through. With ready to eat food, it could just be some of those little tuna packs, a couple of things with protein, some protein bars, but have something in there to tide you over. Battery operated radio, decommissioned cell phones can dial 911 if you need to, bottled water, whistle for flagging people down. But I also, this is the basic list that, everybody kind of has. I also thought about in terms of our families and what we might need. So medications, I have extra medications written on here, but we have a different process. So since this is a go bag that I might have to use in the case of fire or evacuating in 5 minutes because there's been a chemical release or nuclear disaster or something in my area, because I'm in that kind of zone, I keep a Ziploc bag with all of the bottles, the current bottles of medicines for each of us in that go bag. And when I load my AM, PM kind of little daily pill box, I load from there and then I put that Ziploc bag back with the bottles in it. And that way I know if I grab that bag, I've got the bottles, I can go get an emergency refill on those prescriptions if we're in a disaster. Now, in the case of a fire, it might be a little more difficult. I might have to wind up paying. I might have to buy a couple of days, at my cost. But at least I've got the bottles, the prescriptions are there. And by the way, you can also take pictures of those labels on your phone and keep those too. You might want to bring your child's favorite comfort item or duplicate of that comfort item. Noise canceling headphones, earphones are really great for some of our kids. We use them a lot. Sensory items, a blanket, a copy of your ID, like a paper copy of your ID, in case your wallet gets lost. Brief medical history, the Take and Go emergency book. You'll have the link in this PowerPoint. Really awesome document that was developed by all of the Families Help and Family Centers in conjunction with some other emergency operations people in the state. And it's a good thing to have and to update in paper. Hand sanitizer, notepad, candies for diabetics, chargers for your phone, maybe a strobe laser and some masks, given what we're potentially dealing with at a shelter. If you're there with a lot of people, I think I'd be putting a mask on, to be honest. So let's talk about sheltering in place. And you'll notice this is, I think, one of the first great idea logos on here. This might be something that you want to train your direct support worker on and what to do if they are at home and there's a chemical issue in the community, how to secure your home. So close and lock exterior doors and windows, pull shades and curtains, particularly if there's danger of an explosion. Turn off the fan for the air conditioner and heating system, close the fireplace damper, and make sure that they're paying attention to radio and TV information. You want them to stay in an interior ground level room with, if they have to stay longer than a few hours, food and water. Make sure they take your pets. Now this next one, duct tape and plastic sheeting to seal cracks around doors and vents. That's something that the Red Cross kind of came out with after 9/11. They were saying that, but there's all kinds of schools of thought back and forth about that, because then you're kind of sealing off your air supply and all this kind of stuff. So, I'm just giving you that as American Red Cross as a resource is what they said. You want to remain in place, though, definitely until you're told whether it's safe or you have to evacuate. And it could mean that you have to stay at home for an extended period. Chemical and nuclear emergencies, where the vast majority of the state is at risk for this. This is a picture of an explosion at the Geismar chemical plant in Geismar, Louisiana. This is an actual problem that happened. People were evacuated due to that chemical plant explosion. You want to ask, yourself and your EOC people, am I in an area where there is nuclear power or chemical explosions where they could be a danger? Look around and see where there are major rail lines near your home. Is there a major switching station for train cars? Derailments can occur not just when trains are going full speed, but when they're switching out cars and stuff. And ask if there's any other industrial plants in your area that could have a potential for a problem. Now, this is a diagram I've used before. And really, there's probably a lot more green and red dots on our state and plus signs now. But this visual just gives you an idea of what you're looking at. And if you're anywhere along the Highway 90 corridor across South Louisiana, end to end, the I-10 corridor, going up I-49 up to Shreveport area, all of those areas have the red dots are gas plants, the green squares are refineries, and then the yellow pluses are other facilities that are oil and gas infrastructure that potentially could have an issue. So you can see we all pretty much are in a zone that we could be experiencing a problem from an oil and gas or other type of facility related to the oil and gas industry, as far as chemical leak or safety goes. So it just says most of the state needs to plan accordingly, if not all. Well, then there's also fertilizer plants, grain elevators, paint processing plants. And of course, I said those train lines, trucking routes, any interstate highway. Those can all be at risk for chemical spills, and you could be in that vicinity. And this diagram here, if you look at it, it just shows you some of the hospitals. Where are our hospitals located? Are schools located? The little red dots are schools. The H on the blue field, the white H on the blue field, that's a hospital. You can see they're all pretty much centered around those same areas that have chemical and other type facilities that could be at risk for explosion. This is a diagram of an issue that happened in Texas, the West Texas fertilizer plant explosion. This happened a few years ago, and you can just take a look at it and see your fertilizer plant that exploded was in the red circle, and it shows you 500 feet out. Well, just outside of 500 feet, there's a nursing home and a middle school. At 1,000 feet, at 1,500 feet, you've got a high school, the edge of a high school. So you can see these plants are really in our backyard. And if you look all the way at 2,500 feet towards the bottom of the screen, that's where they set up triage. So that was the safe area, the first safe area that they had to set up a triage. In this chemical explosion, this is a fertilizer plant, as I said, 15 were killed, 226 injured. 2 schools were completely destroyed. That high school and that middle school flattened. I'm sure the nursing home was flattened too. And there was a crater 10 feet deep by 100 feet wide. So that's pretty significant. So these things can do some major damage. So what do we do about this? So in one of these type of emergencies, you might be called to evacuate in place, or as we called it, shelter in place. Now that could be at home, at work, or at school. So you might be home when it happens, but your kids might be in school. They may not be able to leave school. The students may be required to shelter in place for their own safety. They may be required to evacuate as a whole with their class for their own safety to a location outside of the area, out of the danger area. You may be required to leave your home immediately in 5 minutes. I've already had that happen to me. There was a chemical leak in a train that's not far from my house, and we had the police at our door at 6 a.m. They said, we would like you to leave within the next 5 to 10 minutes. So these things do happen, and you need to think about, how do I prepare for that? So the first thing I suggest is you check with your school district for their emergency plan. Discuss those emergency scenarios in the context of your child's IEP or health plan. You may have a child that maybe your child has asthma. They just have an individualized health plan, or they have an EpiPen. They have a health plan for that. They don't have an IEP. Discuss it in that context. Who is keeping that child's medication? If it's at the nurse's desk, how is that going to work? If the child has a medical emergency, if the school goes on lockdown, in an active shooter, in a chemical emergency, how is your child going to get access to their asthma medication or their EpiPen if it's not kept with the child? It really should be with the child, and there should be at least 2 people trained that can administer that, and one of the two with the child at all time, so that the medication can be administered. That's what really needs to happen. So if that's not happening, have a discussion in your health plan, your IEP. You want to think about having a contact out of state so you can connect with your family members if you can't reach them because you may have communications down. Take your pre-packed 72-hour go bag, make sure you have that ready. And you want to make sure your direct support personnel, your workers, are aware of what to do in the case of one of these emergencies. Do they know how to find information on your television or on the radio that will be distributed by your parish if they have your child during an emergency when you're not home? So think about some of those things, and it's a good training opportunity. So weather-related emergencies, let's talk about this a little bit, y'all. It's not just tornado season. We're in Tornado Alley. And I always tell my son, don't sleep naked, but he does. So we laugh about that all the time. But yeah, when we have a tornado warning in the middle of the night, we have naked butt coming into the bedroom. So I have to grab some pants for him. But it's just happening more and more because we are in Tornado Alley and we need to start thinking about these things. So ask yourself, where's your home's safe place? Where do you go? Is it a central hallway or bathroom? If you have someone with mobility issues or somebody, like in my case, who's ornery when he's sleeping, and you're going to have to wake him up and maybe get him into that room, how am I going to do that? One of the things I came up with, I found actually on a training that's going to be linked at the end of this, and it talked about different ways to move people with mobility issues, because technically abstinence to not move is his mobility issue. And they had some ideas for things like using a kayak that's retrofitted with straps and for safety to get somebody down a pair of steps. In my case, we're single floor. I'm just going to throw the blanket on the floor and drag him. So that's kind of where we are. You have some water supply there, flashlight, a radio. You want to stay away from windows in this case, and you may want to have an emergency cell phone there. This is something else you also may want to use to train direct support workers and other staff, and your family, your whole family should know how to react when there's a tornado. You'll see the picture of the young man with the helmet on it looks like he's in a closet or something. This mom grabbed her son's football helmet at the last minute, stuck it on his head. It's something that they're recommending more and more, that if you do have any kind of helmet, bike helmet, football helmet, or anything like that, that you may want to put that on your kids, because head injuries are the leading cause of death in a tornado, or hospitalization. So having that helmet on is great. Know that a few years back, when there were multiple, like just, one horrible day was like 50 or 75 tornadoes up in Kansas, and this whole school had gotten hit with the kids in the school. The football team all put their helmets on, and they were up against this wall, and the wall came down. They were all fine because they had their football helmets on. They were all safe. So something to consider for our kids if they'll cooperate with you to do that. Now, with regard to weather-related emergencies, of course, we all know about hurricanes in South Louisiana. When you're making that decision, whether you need to leave or stay, always consider the fact that even a quote unquote small hurricane can produce offspring tornadoes. This happened with Hurricane Andrew back in the early 90s when it went through and destroyed Homestead in Florida. It came through and there were some spin-off tornadoes that really decimated LaPlace, Louisiana. It was pretty awful. So consider that, because you still have the concerns for tornadoes spinning off if you're staying home and sheltered in place. Make sure that you have TV station weather apps on your phone, live Facebook feeds, you're checking those if you need to. And your Alert FM app will act like a weather radio on your phone. But again, if you have a little transistor radio with a few batteries, that might preserve your phone battery in case you need it in emergency. Flu and pandemic, I'm not going to focus on too much because I think we're kind of pandemic'd out. Just think about making sure that you have some stockpile of the type of things that you're going to need. At the beginning of our hurricane season, I always check my supply of like cough medicine and fever reducers, pain relievers. And, you know, you can go to Walmart for $4 and get a bottle of ibuprofen and a bottle of Tylenol. I get, you know, generic brands, and just make sure I have them for this coming season in my cabinet, because flu season is going to be right after hurricane season. And to be honest with you, I mean, I've already heard of some cases of flu coming out of Florida already. So, you know, have some of those things on hand. Make sure you know a pharmacy that will deliver. A lot of them are doing that now, a lot more than they did because of COVID. And then, of course, limit your exposure. And if you want to just have a fun romp, learning more about how awful a virus can be and how it can spread, Contagion, this movie Contagion, it really does give you an idea of what the authorities are up against in trying to get a handle on a pandemic, especially a fast moving pandemic. So think about what your family's going to do in case of school closure. Is anybody in school out of town? What are those school evacuation procedures and transportation? Making arrangements for doing work remotely. I think most of our schools have done really well with that now. A lot of the kids are getting those small iPads and things. But consider these contingencies within the context of your overall plan and your communication plan. Now, this is probably one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about just the pandemic thing. Is this is a great training for your workers to talk about pathogens that could, you know, create illness in your loved one that they're working with, or anybody in the family. Teaching them to treat blood, bodily fluids, and broken skin and mucous membranes as if they were infected. They should always be treated as if they were infected. How to use universal precautions, hand hygiene. There's a video there. There's also a training on both the fiscal agents for self-direction participants on hygiene and this type of thing too. So make sure your workers are receiving that training. You can get an in-home vaccine if you want it now. It has been available for a while. If you want a vaccine, and they are recommending boosters for people who are vaccinated at the very beginning of the vaccines coming up. So check with your doctor to see if you're due for a booster. So a little bit about fire emergencies. This is another training for your direct support worker. And I don't have this on here, I really should. Do you have a spot in front of your house where the whole family is supposed to meet? In front of our house, we have a light pole that's like right on the property line between my house and my neighbors. That's our meeting point at the light post. So if people are exiting however they can, that's where we're supposed to meet. You can get talking smoke alarms to help deep sleepers or people with disabilities, intellectual disabilities. Some studies have shown that even children will react better and wake up faster if it's a talking smoke alarm that's got a recording of the mother or the main caretaker's voice. So that can be helpful. Use alarms. You can get alarms that shake the bed. Flash a strobe with some sound for individuals with hearing impairments. Put alarms by each bedroom, outside the bedroom, on each floor, and practice drills more often for people with intellectual disabilities. Now, technically, we, as anybody in self-directed waiver services, should be conducting, and honestly, in waiver services at all, let me just say that, should be conducting emergency fire drills with their worker. It's not so much, are you teaching your child how to get themselves out, although it could be, but you want to be sure that your worker has sort of this muscle memory on what to do and how to get your child out in a fire. So you want to make sure they're doing it as well. You want to practice low and go, checking doors for heat. And it's been suggested to have like a pair of shoes that they can just put on their feet just to run out, because you don't want them to get burned feet if there's, you know, fire falling to the floor or anything like that. This is an example of some different logos you can put in the front window of your front door or in your child's window. notifying first responders that the individual may not respond to those verbal commands or may have some other issues. The one on the left, you print out at nationalautism.org. It just, you print it out, cut it out, and tape it up in your door. The other one is from ifineedhelp.org, and you're going to see more about that website in a moment. Now, just a bit about flood emergencies. This is one of the biggest things I'm seeing lately. Like every time I see one of these floods, there's always a picture of somebody who drove under an overpass. If you're going under an overpass, you've got to consider that that is just too much water, and don't do it. Just turn around. The Hurricane Center, National Hurricane Center, a few years ago issued some new flood predictions that go along with the categories prediction of a storm, so that you can get an idea of what the storm surge would be, because you may have a low category storm with a high storm surge. So this is just an idea of what it looks like. If you're looking at red, that's more than 9 feet, orange is more than 6, yellow is more than 3, and blue is up to 3 feet of water. So if you're in the blue and you could wind up in up to 3 feet of water, that is you are an evacuation person. You need to go. And just remember, there's a lot of health risks in that nasty water. Diseases, wound infections, chemicals. They could drown. A person could drown. Bites, animal bites. You know, there's gators sometimes, and electrical hazards. So, you know, don't let your children play out in that stuff. It's just really dangerous. So let's talk about some. And I'm trying to see. I didn't check my time yet. Okay, I'm looking at our time. Make sure we're on time. Just some disability related emergency issues. So please note that the suicide prevention lifeline has now changed to 988. They have their own 3-digit dial code for suicide prevention line, crisis line. So just make a note of that and put that in your phone so that you have it. And then note that individuals with autism, children in particularly, 92% of them have some level of wandering around, and it is the #1 cause of death among children with autism. So this is a training for direct support workers as well. What do you do if the child they're entrusted to wanders off? They absolutely should know to look at the closest water sources: pools, canals, water retention ponds, lakes, streams, anything like that, and they should be notifying 911 of that as well. That those police should be looking into that as well. This is If I Need Help. You can see that this is a nonprofit. What they do is generate a free QR code for you that you populate with whatever contact information you want. And then you can get these items however you want. It's very inexpensive for like the dog tag for the shoe or the business card, whatever. You can also get those window clings. And then if the individual is lost and someone finds them, they can easily scan that QR code, get a phone number, and call you. These are just some other options. There's the Bell and Howell does have a sonic alarm, but I think that sonic alarm has changed a little bit. I don't think it's exactly the same as that one, but it just gives you a beeping sound in the house if a window or door opens or whatever you attach it to. There's some other locators and medical alert bracelets that you can see, and when you get this PowerPoint, connect to those links. You should also know that none of the power companies anywhere in the United States is going to prioritize you if it's if you are reliant on power to sustain life. They can't always prioritize you before anybody else, because there may be 10 things ahead of you that have to be fixed before they can fix yours. Yours may not work even if they fix yours, because there's 10 other things down the line. So you really need to consider that in your plans and your evacuation. If you do use a generator, make sure you have reserve gas. You only use it safely in the containers that are approved for that. Follow the directions and don't place those close to windows. To give you an idea of what to expect days without power, Category 1 would be 7 days and a Cat 4 would be 21 days. That's per Entergy Louisiana last year. So 3 weeks without power is rough. That's going to be rough. You may also want to invest in some solar options, at least if nothing else, just to charge up those electronic devices that we use and our kids need. So you're not drawing down more on your generator. Now I want to go, we only have about 10 minutes. I want to go through active shooter real quick with y'all, because this is something that I really feel strongly that we need to be training our direct support workers in. And this diagram just gives you some information on how often these occur. It's really just a matter of probabilities. If you can see, last year we had 647 mass shooting events in the country. This video, Run, Hide, Fight, I strongly urge everyone to take a look at it and then think of that video in terms of the places that you go. Are you looking for the exits when you enter an unfamiliar place? Do you know the exits in the places that you visit often? If you are in an active shooter event, you want to find back rooms and other exits, you can use belts or ties to secure doors. If you do secure the shooter, never touch the gun, cover it with a trash can. Again, this is some training for direct support workers. Law enforcement is not going to, their role is to stop the shooter. When they first come in, they're going to run toward the shots. You're running away from the shots. Officers are not going to help the injured first. They're going to walk right over you. They may be in different uniforms. They may look all different. You see that in that video. They could use pepper spray or tear gas. They're going to be yelling orders. You want to put down any items in your hand, especially if something could be misconstrued as a gun. And let's teach our kids to raise your hands with your fingers spread so that law enforcement in these events can see that there's nothing in their hands. Don't ask for help. They'll come and help you when they're ready to help you, but before they can do that, they've got to get the shooter. Once you've reached a safe location, you want to stay there because they're going to have to witness interview you. And don't leave until law enforcement do instruct you to do so. Now, if you call 911, the things that they're looking for is, where did you last see the shooter? The number of shooters, if there's more than one, any kind of physical description you can give, number and type of weapons. And look, it doesn't have to be, I'm not a gun person. I don't know anything about guns, but I know I can say he had a short gun or a long gun. And that gives them a lot of information. And the number of victims that you potentially saw. Now, this is a great exercise. We're short on time. I might have done it so you could answer in the chat, but this is something good for you to do with your direct support workers or with your staff or anything, just as an exercise to get this in our minds. Name all the exits in your local Walmart store. Whenever I do this in a presentation and I have that active participation, and I'm not a little rushed for time, we do this exercise and everybody remembers, of course, you got 2 exits in the front. You might have an extra exit at garden. You've got maybe an automotive exit and you've got a back exit. But every Walmart store and all these big box stores have emergency exits all along the side walls. If you ever go down one of those side walls where the fish are or hardware is, keep an eye out. You'll see where those exit doors are. That is what that is for you to exit in an emergency. Quickly, I'm going to go over communication plans. The fact that you should have a communication plan that's just got everything you might need in it, including your local EOC. Sorry, I went a little too far with that one. Your provider agencies, your support coordinations, your support coordinator, but not just your coordinator's cell phone. You want to get the 800 number of the support coordination agency for their answering service, because your support coordinator might also be affected by the storm. They may not have communication. So you need to have that other number. And that's something we should have on a regular basis, not just hurricane season. Your Medicaid plans have that member services number that's on the back of your card. Plug that in your phone, or better yet, download the apps for the plan. There's a lot of different ways you can communicate over the internet when there is a Wi-Fi connection, but you don't have self-service. That happened in the flood in Baton Rouge. People were using WhatsApp and Talkatone. You just want to be sure that whatever you're using, that let's see, I'm sorry, I pressed too soon. That whatever you're using, the person on the other end doesn't have to have the same app in order for you to communicate. And then have a printout of your emergency numbers. Here we are. You want that emergency operation parish government number in your phone, Homeland Security, your human service district numbers, your Medicaid plan, your provider agencies, childcare. Put all those numbers in your phone now while you're not stressed. Put ICE in front of your number. So if you're unconscious, first responders can use that to call your emergency contact. You might want to have some phone numbers for emergency hotels for evacuation in your phone already. I do that. I have them all together. I just put evac, and then I know it's a hotel. Waiver recipients include those support coordination numbers, as I said. These are some communication plan trainings that you may want to use, look at for yourself and for your direct support worker. Have a statement in your plan for the worker's responsibility within each potential emergency for your plan of care. Describe how your participant may react, and create a plan of action for each potential risk. Make sure you have a personalized plan for your child or for yourself, and your support coordinator is your first line of contact in an emergency after you've called 911 and the person is safe. So you want to take those numbers. Again, human service districts, you can take those numbers as well. Support coordinators do review those plans, and I know everybody gets those calls. And then OCDD will activate their emergency plan, where then they have to call you and ask you, are you going to evacuate? These are just some links. The Take and Go emergency book, add 211 and 511 for road closures to your phone, and a link for the parish emergency preparedness or emergency operation numbers where you can find your parish number. Just a little bit about some of the plans, all of them, and I'm going to kind of flip this quickly. The main thing to remember out of all of these plans is have your card with you or download the app and have that member services number to call. So if you are evacuated out of state or out of the area and you need care, those managed care organizations will connect you to someone in the area to get you the care you need while you're out of your area. They're all pretty much are saying the same. They all pretty much have the same rules on renewing prescriptions, making sure that you're getting the prescriptions you need before you go, or getting them after. Usually they have case managers that are helping call people ahead of time. This is a great example of the app. United Healthcare has a screen where you can say, call me now, call me later. I want to talk to a nurse, or send me an email. And you can also look for doctors as well in Louisiana if you're in that app. So they all pretty much, as I said, are doing the similar things and have emergency preparedness information for you. And then I have a list of some additional safety preparedness things. This special needs series from Safe Kids Worldwide is excellent. I highly recommend it for training, but I also highly recommend it for individuals and learning how to prepare themselves and prepare their family if they have any kind of impairment, cognitive, mobility, visual, or other. If you are evacuating with somebody with a mental health issue, a severe one, I strongly urge you to discuss evacuation with their psychiatrist and how you should prepare, but don't try to be alone with them if they could go in crisis. And the little visual on the side is a special seat buckle guard that can be put on the seatbelt so they can't unlock it while you're driving. Plan for your service animals, have an emergency kit for your service animals. And I have a link to a disaster readiness tips for owners of pets and service animals. It's really important to be sure that you have what your service animal is going to need as well, because you rely on them so much. For medications, we've already talked about that a lot. Your plans are going to issue extra medication. Legacy Medicaid also authorizes up to 30 days. Please note that for Legacy Medicaid, if you're refilling in the event of an evacuation, you may have to give your pharmacist the date of birth and your social security number. And I think that has to do with them the state recouping the money because that all is coming out of an emergency fund from FEMA or Medicaid. And then if you have private insurance, check with your private insurance company or Louisiana Department of Insurance to see about extra prescriptions before you go. Also have alternative dialysis places for you to check with, durable medical equipment companies, and remember to bring surge protectors and chargers and backup chargers, 3-prong adapters for your car if you're technology dependent. Plan for those emergencies on the road, bringing extra water, oxygen, etc., in case of breakdowns. And these are just some more little possible things you can have to help identify any particular needs. You got some links for that. And then these are some additional web resources that you can use for training. This is a screenshot of my webpage, and it goes active. It's on there now with some information. And of course, you can click to put the pre-application for disaster food stamps in there. You do have to do that every year. But when a hurricane comes up or any other large scale emergency, I'll be updating that with new information and the newest at the top. And then you just scroll down for everything. And there's a lot of information that'll be in there. There's a whole lot in there right now. So you feel free to check it out. That's at KarenScallan.com. And then my messages when you're done, you've just begun. Remember to have duplication of things in your plan. Redundant systems are what's going to be there for you because you're never going to be able to think of every scenario. And that's it. I know I'm really close. Wallace, are we able to do questions? Do we have a minute or two or?
Sure, we can go ahead and take questions for a minute or two.
Okay, does anybody, I see Tracy says, can I post the link again? Tracy, you're going to get a copy of all of the links in this PowerPoint presentation. So if that's what you're referring to, you will get them. And let's see, do we have a question? Excellent information. Thank you, Devlin. Yeah, I really hope that this does kind of inspire you to, if you're working with families, to either help them dig deeper in developing their plan. On my self-direction page, I have a copy of my emergency plan. It's several pages, multiple pages, and it does incorporate even a gas leak on the stove, which we don't think about. But, you know, you might have a young direct support worker that really isn't sure, doesn't have gas stove, doesn't know how to use that. You know, so feel free to take a look at that. That is also on my webpage. And if anybody wants to contact me with questions later, I'm happy to help them or help them explore what they might do in their unique circumstances for preparedness.
I'm posting a link to your webpage in the chat.
Awesome.
So everyone should see it. And thank you very much, Karen, for presenting to us and sharing such valuable information to us. Again, later on, we'll be emailing you this PowerPoint and a link to our evaluation survey. If you haven't already completed, you can complete it in the email. When you get it, you can click the link and complete it. And if there are no more questions, we'll wait a minute or two in case there's any more questions. And if not, we will end the webinar. And I thank you everyone for attending.
Doesn't look like we have any questions, Wallace, so I want to thank everybody. Y'all have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a great day.